Brian Stile has taken over $500,000 in corporate PAC money, votes against lower prescription drug prices, and against the coronavirus relief bill. We deserve a representative who'll serve Wisconsin families, not special interests. Roger Polack isn't taking a dime of corporate PAC money, and he knows something about real service. He served in the Bush and Obama administrations, deployed to Afghanistan to take on the Taliban. We know he'll serve us and no one else.
I'm Roger Polack, and I approve this message.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our virtual meet and greet today with congressional candidate Roger Polack and our special guest, first Vice Chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, Felesia Martin. My name is Mary Jonker, and I am Chair of Wisconsin's 1st Congressional District Democrats. The 1st Congressional District Democrats' purpose is to elect a Democratic representative to Congress. In order for you to know what is happening in the 1st Congressional District and keep up with election information, like us on our Facebook page, Wisconsin 1st Congressional District. The election is just over a week away on November 3rd, and I hope everyone who has not voted has a plan to vote. Go to myvote.wi.gov to answer any questions you may have. Also, get involved by volunteering and donating what you can to help our candidate. This is an election that we simply cannot just vote. The link for Roger's website is scrolling at the bottom of our screen. Go to the website under Get Involved, and you can either donate or volunteer. Our special guest today was elected to the Democratic Party of Wisconsin as the first vice chair at the state convention in June 2019. Felesia Martin currently serves as a county board supervisor in Milwaukee County, and she is vice chair of the Environment Committee and the Economic and Community Development Committee. She is also a member of the Milwaukee County Pension Study Committee. Felesia is a longtime resident of Milwaukee in the Sherman Park District, where she has lived there for more than 40 years with her husband, Terrell. Vice Chair Martin worked as a volunteer supporter of then-Senator Barack Obama's bid for presidency of the United States of America and was one of 2 Wisconsinites to serve as a national co-chair of President Obama's 2012 re-election campaign and was on the steering committee of Women for Hillary in 2016. It is my pleasure to introduce Vice Chair Felesia Martin.
Thank you, Mary. I really appreciate that introduction, and I am so glad to be here with you all today. And I want to say welcome to Roger Polack for being with us today regarding his race. We look forward to hearing from you. This is exciting. I think for the first time in a long while, we have a real shot with Roger winning against Brian Stiles. And I am excited to hear all of what he has to bring to the table and what's going on overall in our elections here in Wisconsin. I think we're in pretty good shape. The enthusiasm, wow, what a difference from 2016. I see people coming out who stayed at home in 2016, but this year, I think we finally understand what's at stake. Roger, I'm going to ask you to hop in here a little bit. What have been your thoughts on what you're seeing since you've run?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of enthusiasm. It's been a marked sea change from 2016, and there is, obviously we're running in the midst of a national pandemic that has cost the lives of over 220,000 Americans. And I think that has animated the Democratic base. It has made people take a second look at the presidential candidates and local representatives who are Republican. And I think we've seen, I drive around Racine and see a number of Republicans for Biden signs, and that's fantastic, and yeah. I think there is going to be also the huge turnout that we're seeing so far in early voting and in absentee voting. And that's largely, I think, increase in Democratic voting, and we need that to hold from now until November 3rd. And everyone that they know has got to get themselves to the polls and get someone else that they know to the polls too, and make sure that everyone gets out and votes. But that's what I've seen, is enthusiasm. I think there's a lot of frustration as well that's animating people's decisions this cycle. And I think, there is a real desire for change. And, that's said every election, but I really feel like this time we're seeing people cross over to the other side much more.
Absolutely. So far, we've seen 1.1 million return absentee ballots this year for this cycle.
Phenomenal.
And I am thrilled to hear that. We know
Hi, is all right, looks like we lost Felesia. Mary, do you want to come back? You want to come back on, and we can keep it going. In the meantime, let me talk about my background and introduce those who are on the call to myself, more fully. I'll say that I grew up in Racine. I was born and raised in a family that struggled to make ends meet. My mom worked 3 jobs while I was a kid to keep a roof over our heads, and my dad dealt with substantial mental health issues, and paying things like rent was a huge struggle of mine and my family's. And so I bring that background to this race of being able to empathize with people, especially at a time like this where the future is uncertain and people don't know what the next month is going to look like. But I persevered with help from the community, from government programs. I was a Rotary Exchange student in high school through the Racine Rotary Club, and I got grants from the federal government to go to college, first in my family to go to college and to graduate from a 4-year university. I graduated from UW-Madison, and I was recruited and joined the intelligence community out of school. I ended up working in an organization that focused on stopping the funding to terrorist organizations around the world. After 9/11, that was found to be a huge gap in our nation's security, is where is the money coming from? How is it getting spent? So there was a huge initiative to follow the money, and I was part of that team. And then with the surge in Afghanistan, I was part of the team that deployed to start focusing on the funding of the Taliban and how they were getting their money, and then stopping the funding to the Taliban. I see Felicia's back on, but I'll wrap up a little bit more about my background. We can get back to the program. But when I came back from Afghanistan, I had a real appreciation for the importance of rule of law in society and the absence of that means to a country. And so I went to law school at night, studied at night while working during the day on major national security initiatives. I was part of the team that implemented and negotiated the nuclear agreement with Iran to prevent Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. And then I went to a law firm for a couple of years, but felt like we are in the midst of a moment in our country that everyone needs to stand up and do whatever they can to make a difference. And watching the election in 2018 and not winning that seat after Paul Ryan retired, I took a hard look at myself and what I want to accomplish for our country, and decided that I'm going to get in this race. I'm going to win back this seat for the Democratic Party and for democratic principles. And so I entered the race January 8th, and we had a phenomenal support throughout the primary. Won every county in the district, and had, I think, a commanding win with a real mandate to go forth and beat Brian Stile. And we've been running a totally grassroots campaign to get that done. And now here we are with 9 days to go, right? T-minus 9 days, and it's exciting time to be fighting for change right now, and I'm really thrilled, and it's an honor to be a part of it.
Thank you all, and thank you, Rogers, for sharing your background with us. And I do apologize of technical difficulties in which
All right.
we talked about earlier. Well, today we're going to be looking at quite a few things, and we're going to look at leaderships in the time of COVID-19, our jobs and the economy recovery. Let's talk about quality health care, affordable quality health care, justice and equality for all Americans. These are hot topics right now facing America, facing so many Wisconsinites, and we'd love to hear your thoughts on those topics and talk about what's at stake. I have said, and you've heard Vice President Biden say often on the campaign trail, truly what's at stake is more than just the presidency, more than Senate seats and congressional seats, and even on the state level. Truly what is at stake is the American Republic, who we are as a nation, and who and how we define ourselves and our station in the world. And we want to talk about that a little bit today, as well as we engage in our Q&A period. First of all, COVID-19. America, we have lost greater than 200,000 people. Our leadership starts at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And we see that our president is incapable of handling this with any seriousness, with any thoughtfulness of engaging with our scientists, our researchers, and with the CDC. And hence we have mixed messages and people are conflicted. Some are just confused. Is it serious? Is it not? Even with the climbing numbers, people are still confused. And I don't know what else will it take. Does it have to be personal level before a person realizes COVID-19 is real? It can take a life. I will be attending a funeral tomorrow of a cousin who was 57 years old.
Sorry.
An Army veteran taken out by COVID. He went to Afghanistan, but he came home whole. But yet he's taken out by COVID. And could that have been prevented had we had adequate leadership who took this pandemic serious when they heard about it in January and encouraged Americans to take the necessary precautions? And we need to know what specific steps that needs to be taken to prevent further deaths and sufferings due to this pandemic as it continues, which we know is going to continue into 2021 and perhaps well into 2023. But it depends on how it's managed and if it's managed effectively.
Right.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think and I'm so sorry to hear about the death of your cousin, Felesia. That's tragic. And I do believe that many of these deaths could have been prevented. And, we had 2 wasted months in this country where no action was taken to prepare, even though, as you said, the president knew that this virus was airborne and it was deadly and it was going to kill many people. And we've, in moments of crisis, this is a time to see true leadership. And this is when true leaders rise and meet the moment. And we've seen anything but that from the president. And I would say from Representative Brian Stile as well. It's a failure to, on the most basic level, lead by example. For months and months and months, no masks were worn by these individuals. Well after, it was very clear from the CDC that masks are helpful. Continuing, you go on Brian Stile's Facebook and Twitter page and continually meeting individuals without masks. And that is spreading the disease around. And Donald Trump belittling Joe Biden for wearing a mask, for example. But that's on the individual level. I think the other aspect of leadership is taking the bull by the horns and instituting policies that help keep people safe, that help our country survive and move forward in a pandemic. And for example, Brian Stile, the incumbent, he voted against the first major bill. There was a second little bill, but the Family's First Coronavirus Response Act, which provided increased food aid, PPE, and FMLA, Family Medical Leave Act leave to individuals, and he voted against that initiative. One of only a few dozen representatives, so he's to the right of his own party on this response. And we need to have leaders who are going to focus on solving the problem. And I would have voted for the HEROES Act, which was passed by Congress in May. That's now 5 months ago. That is, that's a complete abdication of leadership. And that would have gotten additional funds to the people that needed it most, to families that are hurting, to small businesses that are hurting, to keep them going. And, the $600 per week additional stimulus has long lapsed, and individuals are facing eviction. And again, Brian Stile voted against a bill that would prevent evictions from individuals. It's just, I feel like what it's done in this pandemic is it's really brought into stark relief individuals' priorities, and to me, it shows that Brian Stile is looking out for the needs. To put it the other way, he's not looking out for the needs of everyday individuals in his home district. And, it's time for change. It's time for change at the top of the ticket with the president, and it's time for change at the congressional level, and it's time for change at the state assembly. There's all of these great state assembly candidates here in southeastern Wisconsin that I think there's going to be a real reckoning in just 10 days, and I'm really excited for that.
Wonderful. We're talking about COVID-19. Now, specifically to you, the first CD, a couple of fast facts, and I appreciate your thoughts on what you've shared thus far. But for our listening audience and members of the first CD, let's just look at some of those statistics in regards to COVID-19. So as for those who have not yet cast their votes and they need to know a little bit more to share with their family and friends and coworkers. In southeastern Wisconsin, in Kenosha, we have 4,600 positive cases of COVID. The number of cases that have died, 74. To me, that's a huge number. Racine, positive cases, 6,600. The number who've died is 106. In Walworth County, there's over 3,100 cases of positive cases, and there are 37 persons who have died. In Rock, there are over 4,400 positive cases, and 39 persons have died. In Waukesha, positive cases, 11,116. And of that number, 110 people have died. Here in Milwaukee, we have over 37,000 cases, and 561 persons have died.
Yeah, that's too many, and it's just many of these deaths were preventable. I know the first person who died in Racine from COVID, and at that time it was being talked about like the flu, and when the president knew that it wasn't like the flu, and that if individuals were armed with that information, people would have taken greater precautions, and less people would have died. And then here we are today, where you have the GOP-led legislature here in Wisconsin that is fighting tooth and nail every common sense safe measure to keep people safe and healthy during this time. And so it's not these deaths here in southeastern Wisconsin and across the state. 8 of the 12 counties hardest hit in the entire United States right now are in Wisconsin.
Exactly.
With the greatest percentage of positive COVID tests. And so we need to really have a sea change in leadership and elect people that are going to take this seriously and really institute policies to make a change here.
We're going to go into Q&A, and we're inviting everyone to ask their questions. And we're going to start off with, what strategies do you recommend for school and businesses to operate safely? We know Governor Evers has put in some orders, and as you stated before, our illustrious state government is in court right now. And one of the appeals court has stayed that order from Governor Evers. So what are your thoughts on strategies for schools and business to operate safely?
Listen, let me first say that, I want businesses and schools to be open and vibrant and, kids back in the classroom, but you can't do that until you have safety taken care of. And, we're in a lot of ways putting the cart before the horse, and then we have to backpedal, and then we go forward again before it's time. And this vicious circle keeps happening, and it's going to continue happening until we really get this under control. And so I think we need to give schools the space that they need and the funding that they need to be able to make decisions that are appropriate for their community. And, when the HEROES Act was being negotiated and put forth, you had Donald Trump and the Senate saying that they were going to take a third, only give funding to schools that were open, open with full occupancy under federal aid. And I think we need to not do that. We need to prioritize getting funding to all schools so that they can make the decisions they need to keep their kids and keep their teachers safe. And small businesses, same thing. We need to get funding, federal funding, to businesses, to small businesses, and not have them fight with large corporations over the same pot of money, which we saw in the CARES Act. And I think that the small businesses need a separate line to go to get the funding that they need, and that needs to be prioritized. For so long, this country and leadership hasn't had a problem bailing out large corporations. But when we're in a moment of crisis and everyday individuals need to be bailed out, we're balking. 5 months now. It's been indecision. I tell you, if these were large corporations on the verge of bankruptcy, decisions would have been made already. But because it's individuals, it's like we can put the brakes on that. And that is.
But I don't mean to interrupt you, but you mentioned the CARES Act and giving dollars to small businesses, and we know that majority of dollars have gone to corporations. What are your thoughts of how we can best, because in the CARES Act, they had dollars set aside for small businesses. I don't know if they didn't specify what a small business, what constitutes a small business, or what happened there. We know that Starbucks received a large portion of dollars and other large corporations, right. And they never mentioned that if it went to small franchise owners or what.
Right.
So what are your thoughts on the dollars that were set aside for small businesses going to corporations? And I know here in Milwaukee, many of the small African American and other minority businesses, they receive nothing.
Right. And you know what is, I think this is another telling thing about my opponent, Brian Stile, is he voted against an initiative to stand up a committee to investigate where that money was going, how it was being doled out, to have accountability. And this is, again, the double-edged sword. Like, there's talk about, we need accountability for tax dollars so that, we're not just spending willy-nilly, and he uses the term, we need a scalpel for the money to go to where it needs to go. Sure, that's all well and good, but when it comes to real accountability on how the administration has supported certain corporations over others, that's where he draws the line. And we need accountability across the board. We need accountability for Democrats and for Republicans to make sure that this is being done the way it should be. And so I think, exactly to your point, certain large restaurants were able to take advantage of it because of the stipulation of company size was applied franchise by franchise instead of to the whole corporate entity. LA Lakers received funding under this program. So I think, we do need to have tighter restrictions on what constitutes a small business and better definitions for that. And then, for larger corporations, for larger businesses, though, they have a separate line to go to get their money. And then we need to have a serious accountability mechanism to examine where that is. I mean, there's the Department of Justice. They're doing investigations. I saw that a number of individuals in Milwaukee have been brought up on charges by the U.S. Department of Justice for fraud in the PPP. But we need an accountability mechanism in the House of Representatives to look at how this has been doled out.
Great. And that pivots perfectly into our jobs and economy recovery portion of this discussion. Our Wisconsin economy has been devastated, as we all know, with the pandemic and the tariff wars. With the administration's tariffs, we know that we lost over 800 small dairy farmers, family-owned dairy farms too. And voters are discouraged and feel that politicians are not helping them. What specific policies would you support to help businesses in Wisconsin that have been adversely affected by the pandemic and consequent shutdowns?
Yeah, I think I've touched on that, with that.
Yes.
We need to make sure that they are getting the money that they need, free from obstruction, free from having to fight with larger entities to do that. There are statewide efforts that are being done as well. State government has this We're All In program, $75 million program providing $2,500 cash grants to small businesses. But we really need to focus at the federal level, getting the money to the businesses that need it most right now. And the HEROES Act does that. There is a bill already that's been passed to do that. It's been passed twice, as a matter of fact. HEROES Act 1, HEROES Act 2. The Senate has refused to pick it up, but they have no problem pushing forward a Supreme Court justice right now when there are individuals who are on the cusp of ruin. And so I think the bill is already there. It provides the funding to small businesses across Wisconsin and across this great country of ours. And it needs to be put forward. It needs to be put to a vote in the Senate and then signed into law.
Great. And we need our people to continue to contact U.S. senators and force them and pressure them to take up this CARES Act that the House has passed so that we can get that essential funding into the hands of the folks who need it.
That's right.
Right now. And what can be accomplished by at both the national and the state level to help millions who have lost their jobs and are struggling to put food on their tables, pay their bills, and just survive?
The weekly additional unemployment benefits that were under the CARES Act that helped so many families make ends meet. And, I grew up in a family that would have been totally decimated by this. My mom worked retail jobs, and, those businesses are struggling substantially right now. And we need to make sure that people are getting additional funding while they're unfortunately, because of the way that this pandemic has been handled and is perpetuated for so long, people are out of work. And we need to make sure that they're getting the money they need. And again, the HEROES Act does that to the tune of $600 extra a week. And I think this is where you see strong differences between me and my opponent, Brian Stile, who calls that unfair that individuals will be getting $600 per week. He doubled down on that just a couple of days ago, telling the Journal Sentinel that he believes that's too much money for individuals. And I'll tell you what, I don't know who thinks that someone is going to get rich or that's somehow an abuse to give someone $600 extra a week to put food on the table, to pay their rent, and to buy gas. And it's going right back into the economy. No one's hoarding $600 a week. People are using that to buy things, and that's good for the economy, especially right now. And so, what it is a complete lack of empathy and not understanding the way the vast majority of people are living their lives. He grew up in a wealthy family, doesn't know what it's like to struggle a day in his life. And, I think we need more people in politics that have experience like that have experience of living in a family that's paycheck to paycheck, so that when it comes time to pull the trigger to bail out individuals, you're not concerned about doing that, And another thing that's talked about as a point of why we shouldn't do that is because of the deficit. The deficit's going to grow too high. I'll tell you what, the Republican Party wasn't scared about the deficit when they moved down the corporate tax rate to 21%.
Exactly.
And under this Republican president, the deficit has grown at a greater rate than it has in prior presidencies. So, now is not the time to talk about deficit. We didn't talk about the deficit during the Great Depression. We didn't talk about the deficit during World War II. We are in that type of crisis here in America right now. And it's
Right.
time to put people first.
Yeah, it's real. And we have to come to that realization. You mentioned your opponent. We know that Stiles has backed the GOP in their efforts to overturn the ACA. We're going to turn our focus to affordable quality health care. Republicans, again, are in court trying to destroy the Affordable Care Act. I know I spent a year and a half of my life trying to get it passed the first, during President Obama's first year in office. And they have, to this day, they still have absolutely no plan to replace it. And in a recent Supreme Court nomination will only add further risk. It appears that they're going to push forward that nomination this coming week. And so access to affordable health care is critical in America. And the issue is only going to get worse during this pandemic.
Right.
So the question I put forward to you is, what is your standard of health care as a right in our country?
Healthcare is absolutely a human right, in my opinion. And we need to make sure that everyone in this country has access to quality, affordable healthcare. You know, you mentioned the Affordable Care Act. Under that act, 22 million Americans got health insurance that didn't have it before. The problem is there's still 28 million Americans that lack health insurance, and we need to provide a policy that allows them to go to the doctor without worrying about being bankrupt for years to come. And the way that we do that, I'm totally with Joe Biden on this. We have a public option that expands access to Medicare, and that's how we fill in this gap. And you know, that is not, you know, a government takeover of healthcare. That's not going to put hospitals out of business. That's not going to put doctors out of business. It's not going to. You're not going to all of a sudden go to a government-run hospital. You are going to have a country where no one is questioning whether or not they have health insurance, and that's what we need. You know, and I mentioned that I grew up in a family where paying the bills and healthcare was a huge cost of that. My father had dealt with mental health issues, and seeing those bills around the house was always, you know, I knew that was a source of anxiety for my family. And the fact that in 2020 right now, people in southeastern Wisconsin are having questions of, you know, do I do this medical procedure that I need, or do I put it off because I can't afford it, is not right. It's not right. And, you know, Brian Style has taken money from insurance companies, pharmaceutical companies, and he has voted against efforts to keep our healthcare costs low. He's voted against efforts that would allow the U.S. government to negotiate down the cost of pharmaceutical drug prices. And it's another example of how he is not looking out for the needs of the people of southeastern Wisconsin.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's turn our focus to a lot of what's going on as far as justice and equality for all Americans. We know that Stiles urged USAG Barr to investigate the protest in Kenosha and the DOJ investigation of protesters across the nation. We saw what Donald Trump did with the guards there in our nation's capital when he wanted to take a trip across the street and do his little thing in front of the church there, and turning U.S. troops on American citizens is something I thought I would never see. And to see that happen and not to see more outraged about that. Tell me what your thoughts are, and how would you as a legislator help our state move towards lasting change in the racial justice sphere? We see what happened with Jacob Blake down in Kenosha there, George Floyd across the border in Minnesota, and so many others that we can go on and on and on. Breonna Taylor, so on and so forth.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there. And first, in terms of, you know, the president's response to this, and
we appear to be having some more technical difficulties with Roger's feed. So until he comes back, let's talk about the importance of the first CD, which is going to be critical to Wisconsin winning this race for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. We know that the first CD is include many purple parts of the state, like Kenosha and Waukesha, and some of the Milwaukee suburbs. We know that we have several strong candidates running in races across for the state assembly and for the state senate. And we're trying very hard to flip these red seats into blue seats. And I think we have, again, strong candidates to do that. With your help, we can make that happen. And we have these last 8 days to make sure we turn it around. Our DPW organizing team has been working in the first CD for well over a year now. And I am so thankful that we have that structure. Thankful for Martha Lanning for helping to establish these neighborhood teams and these organizing teams across our state so that we can work year round and not just during a presidential cycle. And if we could also take a look at how DPW is working alongside with our county parties and making certain that that county parties have what they need. It is imperative to us, absolutely imperative, that we have direct contact with our county party chairs and with the membership. It would be wonderful if we can continue that on again year round and not just during the presidential election. I think it's imperative that we continue to look at each CD. We have Roger back.
I'm so sorry. I'm not sure what happened there. I lost the connection.
Not a problem.
Sorry about
We're
that.
just going over the first CD and this importance, but you were talking to us about justice and equality for all Americans.
Right. You know, I was talking about I'm not sure where I cut off, but I was talking about the response first off. And, you know, Brian Style is taking credit for the good work of the people of Wisconsin, the National Guard in Wisconsin, and the governor who responded quickly to this. By the time that Brian Style had even got engaged, you know, there was already, things were already well underway, and the violence was put to an end organically within Wisconsin. And I think Kenosha has come together and begun the healing process faster than any other place that we've seen in the United States. And I'm really proud of that, and proud of what Kenosha was able to do. In terms of healing, you know, what do we do and how do we move for lasting change? You know, I think specifically talking about it, you know, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act that has already passed the House that puts an end to the use of chokeholds and creates a national use of force database, calls for the reexamination of use of force standards, mandates that body cameras be used. And I think those are important both for the police force and for the community. You know, we need to have that level of trust, and that builds that. And then if there is a question, you know, police have the evidence to defend themselves, you know, after the fact, and the community has the evidence that it needs to hold its police forces accountable. And you know, I think going beyond the criminal justice system, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, Felesia. You know, I've spoken to leaders in the Black community in southeastern Wisconsin, and something that comes up continually is the wealth gap, and the need to address the wealth gap if you're going to address racial inequality in our country. And one thing that has come up repeatedly is home ownership and small business ownership in the Black community, and the need to increase home ownership. And you know, looking through policy proposals, one thing that really struck me was, let's expand credit to low-income communities, and do that by looking at alternative sources of credit, like an individual's ability to pay their rent on time month after month, to pay their utilities on time month after month, should go to build someone's credit to be able to purchase a home, you know. And my family would have directly benefited from that. I know my family rented for 18 years. The first 18 years of my life was, you know, almost $600 thrown away every month. And homeownership is the way that a middle class grows. It's the way that middle class individuals accumulate, store, build, and pass on wealth. And I think that would go a long way. And that's what individuals in the Black community have told me, and something that I'm going to bring forward in my representation of Southeastern Wisconsin is, let's unleash the American financial system on tackling the problem of racial inequality in this country. You know, and that's not like some huge headline making news, but I think that it would go a long way, along with unleashing the financial system onto small business ownership in the Black community. But I would love to get your thoughts too.
No, I concur with what you've said. And we have to start with a strong, solid foundation, which starts with having a good understanding of financial literacy.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been a deficit. And it goes to education. We have to start having financial literacy taught in our public school system. And in my opinion, it can't just start in high school. It needs to start in elementary school from the moment they enter into kindergarten. And for families, if your child is earning a weekly allowance, let's say, I don't know if families still do that. I know when I was growing up, my siblings and I had a weekly allowance. Some of us did better than others. And by no means was financial literacy taught in my schooling, or in my home. Although we saw our parents sit, at the kitchen table when they paid their bills and everything. And we understood that you have to save. So we had a little bit of financial literacy, but not. They didn't make us save any of and I always tease my parent about this. My pop is gone, but my mom is still here, and I always tease them about, you guys did a poor job of raising us. You didn't give us much responsibility when it came to honing our financial chops. Because I would have thought that you would ask us to save something, and we didn't have any of that.
Mm-hmm.
Our allowance was our allowance to do whatever we want with it. And I think for African-American families across the country, we all need to have, because we have these discussions all the time in our family forum, what could we have done better? And the number one thing, no matter if it's the poorest of the poor in my family or those who have made it out of poverty and are doing well, everyone says financial literacy. I wish I would have known more.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I would have known when I was working that McDonald's job in high school for my first job that I should have been saving some of those dollars towards my future. We just didn't have that. So I agree with you, and we need to look at how we invest, connecting those folks with that entrepreneurial spirit, connecting with those who are out there already doing
Mm-hmm.
work that they want to do, and mentoring them so that they have a good understanding of running a business, because everybody's not going to be able to go to college.
Right.
We understand that. Right. It would be wonderful if we could afford, if we would have a system where a 2-year college or a technical degree would be on the taxpayers and everyone would be afforded that opportunity. America would be so much stronger if we had that. But barring that happening, we have to increase these SCORE-like organizations where the CEOs take an interest in the smaller businesses and mentor them along. And I think that'll go a long way to equality.
Yes, ma'am. And I think also, on the point of credit and financial literacy, I think we also need to do a better job of holding institutions accountable to the fair lending laws that we already have on the books. I'm sure I don't need to tell you this, but there are studies out there where, you know, a black person and a white person have the exact same financial history,
Mhm.
you know, are not going to get the same financial product frequently.
Exactly.
And so that, you know, that is the example of, you know, systemic racism in our country. And we need to work on holding, I think, institutions accountable so
Yeah,
that, you know, we're actually moving forward with a lot of our laws in the books are beautiful, you know?
they are, but we don't exercise them,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
We understand that redlining has been outlawed, basically, but we know that it's still being practiced. And we know that in our school districts for public education, redlining still happens. We
Hmm.
know that our schools are funded according to those neighborhoods, right?
Right.
According to the incomes that is coming into those neighborhoods. And we have to figure out a better way of funding our public school systems other than the tax dollars.
Well, then you have initiatives like Brian Stiles, a big champion of the voucher scheme, you know, which is taking money away from public schools instead of adding it, you know. And, you know, sure, it's great if everyone could go to the school that they want to, but not at the cost of taking away public education dollars, which is the main source of education for the vast majority of people in this country.
Yeah, unfortunately, I feel that a lot of folks don't understand that because the Republicans have done such a great job with their messaging of saying it doesn't take money out of public school
Right.
systems. It just empowers the parent to say where their child gets to go. Yet they're not having the full understanding. Yeah, it does take money out of public school
Right.
systems
Right.
because those dollars do not follow the child. If it's in a voucher or a charter school and that child that's in the voucher or charter school gets suspended and then they're funneled back into the public school system,
Hmm.
those dollars don't follow them back, they stay there.
Hmm. Hmm.
And a lot of parents don't understand that. So if we could figure that out and, like you say, exercise fully everything that we have on the books that would address inequality and racial inequities, we would be so much better off, but we don't. What are the specific actions that can be taken to address um, the inequalities and inequities there in the first CD?
Well, you know, I think I've tried to touch on some of those already. I think,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
know, in terms of, you know, criminal justice reform, I do think getting that George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would be huge, passed. And I think that would, you know, like you look at the Kenosha budget,
Hmm.
body cameras are not on the budget until 2022. That's a full 2 years away. And we need to make sure that that happens more rapidly. And
Yeah. Do you think that is a matter of prioritizing? Our budgets are a reflection of our values and what we see as a priority. And when I saw that and I heard it, I thought, so it's not a priority for them. How do we push them to make it a priority?
well, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act does that. Any law enforcement entity that's taking uh, U.S. federal dollars has to prioritize that to body cameras. You know,
Hmm.
so that's a great way to do it. Is that if you are getting support from the federal government, uh, then you have to use that to purchase body cameras. You know, and I think that's, you know, ideally that wouldn't have to be something that is pushed on a police department. But I think that's one way that you do it.
Exactly. And for those who think that the body cameras would be the end all and be all for us working with law enforcement and holding them accountable, what do you say to that?
You know, it's part of it. It's part of it. But I like, you know, like I said, I think Kenosha has come together quickly, and there's community dialogue between activists, faith leadership, the municipal government, and talking, and the police department, and talking about, you know, real solutions to bring it together. And I agree that, you know, the body cameras are for after something happens. You know, it's not, it's almost certainly not going to stop something from happening in the first place. So you need to have that community dialogue to really have a better understanding of the community that the police are policing, the community having a better understanding of where the police is coming from, and like, let's have a dialogue on a regular basis instead of after one of these tragedies happens.
Absolutely. Roger, thank you so much. And I want to thank the First CD for having me here. Roger, you are most certainly a strong candidate that we can get behind. And you are so on point with your thoughts in handling COVID, how we approach our healthcare system, and tackling this thing called financial literacy, as well as equality across all boards for people of color and for all of our citizens here. And I do appreciate you throwing your hat in the ring. It can't be easy. I know that as far as running for a county board position, it's not the same, but it takes courage to step in and say, enough is enough, and I'm going to be the person to answer the call. And thank you for answering the call for the First CD, because we got to get rid of that other guy.
Well, thank you. You know, I would agree it's not easy, but in some respects, it's kind of is when you look at the problems that we're facing, and the feeling that I want to be part of the solution here. And when you follow, and I'll say this to everyone out there, you know, when you have a strong enough force pushing you towards something, and you follow what your heart and your brain ends up aligning pretty well sometimes, and that propels you into something. And then that's what happens in this instance. And, you know, here we are, and we're 10 days away, I think, from, you know, really having a surprise victory. And I'm really excited about that.
So we're going to have a late October surprise, and it's going to be my belated birthday present. My birthday is November 1st, everybody. And the only thing I want is to see Roger Polack become your congressperson and Biden Harris become our president and vice president.
Amen to that.
We need this in this country. We so need this. Mary, thank you so much.
Well, Vice Chair Martin and candidate Polack, I thank both of you for being here today, taking time from your busy schedule to join us and have this conversation about such important issues, not only to the First CD in Wisconsin, but to the whole country. You know, these are issues that we have to discuss, and they're not being discussed right now in this country. So just need to get it right.
Well, thank you, Mary. And Felesia, thank you for attending and helping us out, and for all the work that you do on behalf of, you know, our great state. And
thank you so much. This was my first time moderating and doing a Q&A. So I was really nervous, but you guys made me welcome. So thank you so much.
Knocked it out.
Well, thank you. You did a wonderful job.
Yeah.
So Roger, is there anything else you want to say to us? You
know, I just want to say, everyone, get out and vote. You know, vote, vote, vote. That's all that there's left to do right now. You see the website right down there, wisdems.org/talk-to-voters. Go to that, and that will get you linked up with a volunteer coordinator to participate in helping people get out to vote. If you can't, if you've already voted yourself and you're looking for that next thing to do, you know, let's go push other people out to the polls. And you see my website down there, rogerforwisconsin.com. I'll say this: we are fundraising right to the very end, and that's all going to voter outreach, voter communication. So that is also extremely helpful. And above all, you know, everyone just stay healthy, and let's stay focused these next 10 days.
Well, you said everything I wanted to say. Yes. Thanks everyone for joining. Thanks the two of you for joining. Get out and not only vote, but help the candidates. Go to Roger's website, either donate or volunteer. There's so much more that still has to be done in this next week. So thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you everyone.